Squirming at Your Feet-ish. A Good Omens fanfiction. Written by Kedreeva. Read aloud by SkyAsimaru. If you enjoy this podfic, you can check out the original story on Archive of Our Own. If you would like to hear more of my recordings or see some of my own work, you can find me through the pen and screen name of SkyAsimaru. Squirming at Your Feet-ish. Summary. Aziraphale wants to hear what the snabies have to say, and Crowley helps him. Crowley led him by the hand into the bedroom, making sure to close the door behind them and lock it. A few months ago, his door hadn't even had a lock, but it was necessary now. It would not be able to stop the particular invasion they were attempting to avoid, but it would send a message that it was unwelcome, and perhaps buy them some time. Time would be enough for now. "Come on," he said softly. They'd already taken off their shoes, hardly ever wore them in the flat since Crowley had switched to a plush, soft carpet. He crossed the room and stopped at the edge of the bed. Aziraphale fidgeted, fingers toying with one another in front of his belly as he remained in the doorway.
Crowley, what if I can't?
Crowley turned back and took a seat on the bed, hands to either side of himself. He gave the question the courtesy of consideration, even though he was clearly meant to dismiss it.
I think it's better to know now, don't you? You've obviously been worrying about it for a while now.
I know, it's just... it's important.
Aziraphale swallowed, but he took a few steps closer.
I want to, but what if I do it wrong? What if I can't go back?
We'll figure it out, Angel,
Crowley said, patting the bed beside him.
Come on, at least wait until after you've tried before you twist yourself up in knots. And hey, that'll be easier once you've done it, right?
Not funny,
Aziraphale said, but he took the last few steps and joined Crowley sitting on the edge of the bed. Crowley smiled and leaned closer, nudging gently against Aziraphale's arm before stretching to press a kiss to his temple.
You'll be fine, I promise. I'll make sure of it. Now, get out of those. You don't want to ruin them.
Although Aziraphale gave him another apprehensive look, he began to unbutton his coat, shrugging out of it and folding it gently to place at the end of the bed. Crowley gave him enough room to take off a few more articles of clothing, his socks last of all, as he pulled his feet up onto the bed. Crowley looked him over with a warm smile before joining him, slithering out of his own clothing until they both sat cross-legged on the bed in their loose underthings.
Now what?
Aziraphale asked, fingers tangling and untangling anxiously.
Close your eyes,
Crowley told him, not moving at all. Aziraphale took a deep breath and closed his eyes. Though Aziraphale couldn't see it, Crowley nodded.
Okay. Now, you know how when you return from heaven, you have to reatomize? It's like that, except you're putting everything back in a different order.
Aziraphale opened his eyes again.
But, Crowley, how am I supposed to know which order?
I'll show you, Angel. Give me a little credit here.
Crowley said with a little laugh.
Come on, now close your eyes.
With a huff, Aziraphale did so, only jumping a little when Crowley touched their hands together.
Crowley, it doesn't hurt, does it?
No, love,
Crowley said, and then they were in it. Light and color and sound and time all occurring at once within them, as Crowley led him into a shift toward their true forms. Aziraphale opened some of his many eyes, looking upon Crowley's sleek, glowing form. Fallen though he was beautiful. His black feathers taking in light the way a black hole could, warping and twining with Aziraphale's essence, distorting them both where they brushed. Crowley stared back at him, slitted golden eyes standing out bright against his scaled contortions. Aziraphale could not follow a single line of his body, all of them squirming and collapsing into themselves, forming anew in the next moment. He was a fluid, writhing mass made of scales and eyes and wings, and myriad shining desires. Without words, Crowley began to coalesce into matter again, and Aziraphale watched with rapt attention, cataloguing every part of the shift. He watched Crowley fold in upon himself, his shadows streamlining into a ribbon, his fire folding beneath him into a searing red stripe, and his eyes collecting into a pool that solidified into a single pair. He laid upon the bed, his purple forked tongue sliding out of his mouth as he waited. Aziraphale could not shiver in this form, but his light wavered in apprehension. He could do this. He closed his eyes, focusing. Normally he would condense himself into limbs and hair and hips and shoulders. He would give himself feet and hands and a nearly flat face with a jaw that barely opened. He would give himself skin, soft and sensitive and finely covered in hairs. This time almost none of that applied. This time he threaded himself into a single line, tip to tail. His jaw pulled long and his golden wings folded down, wrapping around him, turning his scutes gold and leaving his scales flecked in pale color like the finest of chain-linked jewelry. He curved and bent in ways that were unknown to him, in human or true form, becoming a loose coil of loops piled atop one another on the bed. As soon as the shift was complete, Aziraphale felt cold.
"Oh, I'm not sure I like this,"
he said, mouth not quite working the same. His long tongue flicked out, and when it came back, the sensation of scent was nearly overpowering.
"Oh, my!"
Does it hurt?
Crowley asked, his wedged head rising to move closer.
Do you need to go back?
No, nothing so dire,
Aziraphale said quickly.
How do you stand the cold?
Crowley huffed a little snort.
Heaters, he said. An electric blanket. The bathroom has a heated floor.
Oh, decadence,
Aziraphale said dryly, shifting and then freezing.
Oh!
He moved again, slithering out of the loose bits of clothing that encased him.
Oh, now that is strange. You can feel it all over.
Crowley watched him, unmoving, and although snakes could not smile, Aziraphale could practically feel his delight.
Do you want to shift back?
Aziraphale thought about it for a moment, slithering in a big rectangle around the bed, one of his sides brushing Crowley as he passed. It felt positively delightful, all of that motion up and down his entire spine and belly, the slide of his scales over the soft bed sheets. And he was a little tired. Reatomizing was a bit of work, even when he was well acquainted with the shape he wanted to take. Turning into a snake for the first time had certainly done his stamina no favors.
No, not yet, he said. But can you? I'm afraid I can't open the door like this.
Crowley dripped from the edge of the bed, his form shifting as he made the switch back to human form. Aziraphale watched as he dressed, donning everything except his socks, and then he slithered to the edge of the bed as well, intent on following after Crowley. Instead, Crowley gently wiggled his hands beneath Aziraphale and lifted, bringing him up to drape loosely over his shoulders. Instantly, Aziraphale relaxed into it, pressing into the warmth of Crowley's body. One hand stroked down his side, and then they were moving for the door. Aziraphale couldn't hear the door click properly, and realized that his ears didn't seem to work for normal sounds. Despite that he could hear Crowley, he appeared to have manifested without proper ears. He had copied Crowley, however, as exactly as possible, so he wondered if that was just part of being a snake. It didn't matter. He could hear what mattered. The door to the second bedroom opened, and Aziraphale lifted his head to see the glass enclosure that had come into their lives a few months ago. His tongue flicked out, catching the heavy scent of reptile in the room, and his heartbeat quickened.
Wait,
he said, barely a whisper. Crowley stilled just 2 steps into the room.
What if they don't, like this?
Aziraphale, there's nothing not to like,
Crowley told him, and started moving again before Aziraphale could protest. He waited tensely while Crowley unlocked the cage and allowed himself to be unwound from Crowley's shoulders. Vaguely, he heard the stirring of small bodies in soft moss, the rasp of scales against vegetation as 5 small souls roused from sleep. A tiny head poked through the peat and stared up at him as Crowley placed him inside the tank nearby.
Your father has a surprise for you,
Crowley crooned quietly.
Aziraphale?
Aziraphale, mouth open to chide Crowley for the announcement, froze. He could hear them. He looked down, blue eyes fixing on Junior.
Oh,
he said faintly.
I can hear you, little one.
You can hear me?
Junior echoed, and then seemed to realize what he had said, bolting from beneath the bedding with a great big wiggle. Aziraphale jerked back at the sudden motion, though it did nothing to save him from the very sudden assault of 5 lively little noodles, all yelling his name as they crawled all over him.
I can hear you, yes,
he said, over and over, not able to touch his snout to one of them before they were gone again. Joyful exclamations overlaid by questions Aziraphale stood no chance of answering in a timely manner.
I wanted to hear you, so your dad taught me how.
Will you stay a snake?
Asked Junior, and all of them came to a slow stop.
Can you teach us to be humans?
Asked another, although Aziraphale was not sure which, having never heard their voices before.
I'm not, I don't know,
Aziraphale said gently.
I can't stay like this forever, but I can stay like this for tonight. Would you like that?
A chorus of yeses met him, and he looked over the lip of the enclosure to where Crowley watched, a huge smile on his face.
No, it's fine by me, Angel. Easier to swap back in the morning anyway, after a bit of a rest. Probably warmer in there.
As soon as he'd said it, Aziraphale realized it actually was quite pleasant in the enclosure. Warm and soft, and not quite as itchingly dry as the outside of it had been. He could easily stay the night here, coiled around the 5 little lives he'd accidentally brought into the world. He could talk to them all night if he wanted. He could finally get to know them a little better.
I think I would like that,
he said quietly, dropping his head down to where the babies could reach him better. He found himself snout to snout with all of them in a matter of seconds, and if he could have smiled, it would have stretched from ear to ear.
Yes, I think I would like that rather a lot. Thank you, Crowley.
Anything for you,
Crowley said as he closed the door.
Good night.
5 little good nights joined Aziraphale's, and then he settled down amidst the children to have exactly that. The end.
Thank you for reading.
Please drop by the archive
and let the author know what you thought of their work.